Hello and welcome to the iconic Shine Dome, the home of science in Australia. My name is Jagadish. I am currently serving as the president of the Australian Academy of Science, and I warmly welcome you all. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet, Ngunnawal people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I also would like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, those who are joining this evening to our joint symposium with Academy of Law. And I would like to welcome to the Shine Dome Chief Justice of the ACT, the Honourable Lucy McCallum, and President of the Australian Academy of Law, the Honourable Ellen Robertson, our panel of distinguished speakers for this evening, the Executive Committee members and Fellows of both the Academies of Law and Science. And a warm welcome to you all and to those watching online from across Australia. We're delighted to be here this evening in collaboration with the Australian Academy of Science of Law. In this, our 8th annual symposium, we value the opportunity to explore matters at the intersection of science and the law. Over the years, we have held joint symposia on topics such as the reception, quality, and evaluation of scientific evidence in Australian courts, the science-law interface as it relates to climate change, and the science and law of prohibited drugs. The need for a stronger and influential dialogue between science and law sectors is certainly not diminishing. Far from it. Advances in science and technology are rapidly shifting the boundaries of knowledge, and justice systems worldwide continue in their quest to deliver justice fairly and equitably. These conditions demand a deeper interdisciplinary collaboration between our sectors and the creation of a more science-sensitive legal system. This evening, we'll hear from our speakers how our respective practices are using and managing AI, an area that continues to be topical and very relevant in our work and our society. We have an excellent expert panel to share their knowledge with us, and I know there is much knowledge in the audiences too, so I look forward to hearing your questions. To introduce our panel, please join me in warmly welcoming a friend of both of our academies, our chair for this evening, ACT Chief Justice, the Honourable Lucy McCallum. Lucy is Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the ACT, appointed in March 2022. Prior to this, she served as a judge of the Supreme Court of New South Wales and as a judge of appeal on that court. Lucy had a distinguished legal career spanning more than 3 decades, including extensive experience in criminal law, defamation, and public law. Known for her commitment to access to justice and judicial integrity, she is also an advocate for gender equality within the legal profession and has contributed significantly to the development of legal education and mentorship for young lawyers. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you. Thank you, Jagadish. I'm so excited for this evening's symposium. So excited that I tried to jump the gun on Jagadish's introduction. But I had the privilege of speaking this week to all of our panellists, and they have between them such an extraordinary combination of wisdom and experience and knowledge in this field, but really diverse and interesting takes on the topic. If I could attempt to draw together a common theme for their very diverse topics, it's the focus that this discussion will bring to scientific method and legal method, and how the strengths of AI can be harnessed and the risks and pitfalls avoided in each kind of method. So we know scientific method is the development of a hypothesis. I'll be corrected if I say this incorrectly, but the proposal or development of a hypothesis, the development of an experimental framework within which to test it, testing of the hypothesis, and then you either adopt it or reject it according to the results of the testing. And legal method is in a sense the opposite. We are obliged by the doctrine of precedent to adhere to a principle that we inherit from earlier common law or that is imposed on us by statute until it's rejected or expanded upon by later legislation or a higher authority. So in a way our methods are very different, but I think despite those different approaches, both methods should embrace the strengths of AI and have the opportunities to do so. And I think you'll find that this evening's discussion will provide a really interesting forum for bridging that gap and educating us both in the way that synergies can be captured. So if I could ask now that the speakers all come up to the stage. Our speakers this evening, Professor Will Bateman, who's based at ANU Law School, Professor Jeannie Paterson, who's the Professor of Law at University of Melbourne, Dr Stefan Harrer at the CSIRO, and we have online, I hope you can all see him, Professor Toby Walsh, or at least an avatar of Professor Toby Walsh. He may, I have no way of confirming that the person you see on the screen is a real person. It may be an AI-generated image of Professor Toby Walsh, but I've spoken to that image and he seems very capable of speaking on the subject. So the first speaker is going to be Professor Will Bateman. So we're beginning with the lawyers and giving, I'm pleased to say, the scientists the last say. So Will, as I've said, is based at ANU Law School, where his work focuses on the intersection of law, finance and technology. He specialises in legal regulation of public and private finance. He leads research projects on the regulation of artificial intelligence in collaboration with computer science experts and public and private sector organisations. And broadly, Will's topic will be the impact of AI on Australia's constitutional sovereignty. Take it away, Will.
Thank you so much, Chief Justice. Today I'm speaking on the impacts we can or should expect on the Australian constitutional system from extensive use of AI to conduct text-based analysis, legal analysis, and provide advice in the legal system. Put differently, how should we think about the costs and benefits of using AI beyond a back office function or an advanced search function, generatively, in the Australian legal system? But I'm going to begin with a bit of a homespun analogy, which compares a large language model powered chatbot to a diesel engine. I grew up on a beef farm in a very cold part of New South Wales, and we'd have blackouts during the winter months, and we'd need a diesel generator to fire up the electric bar-powered heaters in the house. So we used this once very revolutionary technology, now totally boring technology, to supply a basic human need. The benefits were obvious. We had a warm house and a good night's sleep. The cost of using the diesel generator to provide energy to the house were the fuel input cost, the noise pollution. Anybody who's sat next to a diesel generator knows they're noisy. And of course, the impact, although we weren't aware of it in the early 1990s, on the environment of diesel exhaust. It occurs to me there's another way to use a diesel generator to provide warmth to the house, which thankfully no one in my family thought was necessary when I was growing up, and that's putting the whole diesel generator inside the house. The costs and benefits are roughly the same. You heat the house, perhaps to in a faster way. You raise the heat more quickly than you do, intermediated through the electricity grid, and you have all the same costs. You have a new cost, though, with this use of this technology, which is you eventually suffocate the occupants of the house on the diesel exhaust generated by this heat source. Now, I think about the costs and benefits of using AI in the legal system on our constitutional sovereignty in a similar sort of way. And my claim, which is provocative but not unsubstantiated, is that the extensive delegation of technical skills to to AI by lawyers and legal actors will eventually produce a net reduction in Australia's constitutional sovereignty. And by constitutional sovereignty, I mean, one, the functionality of our constitutional and legal and political organs domestically, and two, the independence of our constitutional system from external actors and external systems. Think about the constitutional state as the nation state if you're not in the jargon completely. Now, I want to explain why I hold this view in three relatively quick steps, given my time. Step one concerns the identity of a constitutional system. What is a constitution composed of? A constitutional system is the product of collective human behaviour in cooperating to solve social problems using technical methods and rules. Technical in the institutional and human sense, perhaps technical in a different way to the scientists' use of that term. Liberal democratic systems use legal rules and processes as their bedrock technique. And that's why the rule of law is so important to democracies and so threatening to authoritarian systems of government. Everything we do and everything we understand as fundamental to what it is to be a constitution involves law and legal processes. Voting for parliaments, challenging government decisions, enforcing private property rights like contracts and property, keeping the peace through criminal law. All of those processes require an identifiable set of human beings who are skilled in understanding, analysing and applying the techniques of the rule of law. And also, critically, who are accountable to the citizenry, politicians, judges and courts for their actions. Now, step two. Step two on my net constitutional deficit, if you use AI too extensively in the legal system argument, concerns the cognitive fundamentals of those skilled humans, essentially how to make a legal brain. Now, here's a proposition. Acquiring the technical skills of law requires repeated practice, both via exposure and repetition of theoretical knowledge, and the practice of specific skills through social interaction with lawyers, clients, judges, witnesses. Here's a slightly more contested proposition. Experienced lawyers' brains will physically change the more these skills are acquired. And here I'm drawing on the literature about structural brain plasticity, which is decades old and very well replicated cross-sectionally and longitudinally concerning the structural changes to the human brain as you acquire technical demanding skills, juggling, learning the London taxi grid, the knowledge as it's called, learning a musical instrument, playing golf, playing soccer, certain balance skills. As humans acquire those skills, their brains change in structural ways, and as they don't use those skills, their brains change back. When the legal expert acquires and practices the skills of the rule of law, their brains will change. As they stop using them, their brains will stop changing. Step three, using AI to conduct legal analysis and writing de-skills the human arms of our constitutional system and can produce a net reduction in our constitutional sovereignty. Now, that's a bold claim, so here are the caveats. I don't mean using AI as a task assistant. I mean using AI as a task delegate. Delegating a task to an AI chatbot or a system requires handing over the core functions of your intellectual task to a chatbot. You fire it up, you ask it questions about the law, it produces answers, you accept them as true. You ask it to draft a document, you print it out, you sign it as yours, you accept it as correct. I'm not referring to AI use as an assistant to organise your meetings, to book your flights, to search for a list of authorities for you. Those are tasks which have been performed by human beings for a long time and have produced skilled jobs themselves, which should not be deprecated, but they don't threaten constitutional sovereignty. Now, I hold the view that AI use and delegation to AI on this scale diminishes Australia's sovereignty for two reasons. The first is obviously that the brains of Australian lawyers will not develop in the necessary way to perform the technical tasks required by the constitutional rule of law. The second diminution, the second reason there's a diminishment of sovereignty is the external element. Using these chatbots and these technologies produces a skills export mainly to the United States. The best chatbots in the world are all American. They're products sold by United States companies, most of which are not publicly listed and have no fidelity to Australian political or cultural values, or indeed scientific values. They're also heavily manipulated by their owners, which is why some chatbots have such different personalities and produce such different answers. As we use it today, AI is not so much an industrial technology as it is a product suite sold by US domiciled oligopolists. This leads to a comparative diminution of Australian constitutional sovereignty versus United States constitutional sovereignty. I'll close by offering two solutions. The first is an absolute ban on the use of AI as a delegation tool for those who learn law, conduct legal analysis, and produce legal texts. This is an easy step, and the only people seriously arguing against it are trying to sell you something or don't really understand how legal systems work. Enforcement can be tricky, but we haven't stopped criminalising murder just because we haven't been able to eradicate homicide. The second solution is to develop AI in Australia, which exists in an accountable political and constitutional structure. This is also an easy step and is simply a question of investment priorities. Australian sovereign AI would also involve a wholly domestic energy and data infrastructure, which would allow decoupling from things like cloud compute services provided by US companies and the catastrophic energy demands they entail. Both solutions, in my view, are necessary for the future health of our constitutional system and our society, and I look forward to hearing counter-arguments from the distinguished group collected here today. Thank you very much.
So Will, in what is a first for me as a chair, you've come in under time and on budget. So I'm going to ask you to take one of the 2 minutes remaining to explain, when you talk about the distinction between a task delegate and a task assistant, what scope are you giving to delegation? Because I think Stefan is going to say nothing can't be delegated and you can still develop good scientific method. So I'm interested to hear how you would define the line between good and bad.
Well, I would. Delegation is an intricately systematised topic for lawyers. It depends on what you're doing, and it depends on the job you're performing. In my view, for lawyers, delegating the core intellectual functions of the legal task, which are determining the applicable law, identifying the relevant facts, and applying the legal rules to the facts to produce a determinate legal answer through a hermeneutic or interpretive process. That is the core of your task as a lawyer, whether it's a legal advisor, a legal academic, or a judge. And delegating that task is illegitimate. It can be done, it just shouldn't be done.
Because it will stop the legal brain developing.
Yeah.
So because my discussion with Stefan, which I'm sure Stefan will expand upon it, was I said to him, so do you think lawyers could use it in the same way you're describing, that it can augment every stage of legal research, feed in the principles, feed in all the decisions of the High Court, ask it, could we extend this principle in this way? And Stefan's response was, absolutely, we're talking about the same thing. So I'd be very interested to hear that idea developed. It's time now to move on, and thank you, Will, that was magnificent. Time to move on to Professor Jeannie Paterson, who's a Professor of Law at the University of Melbourne, specialising in consumer protection, contract law, consumer credit and the regulation of emerging digital technologies, including AI. Jeannie's the co-founding director of the Centre for Artificial Intelligence and Digital Ethics. Her work spans academic research, policy advice and law reform. And Jeannie's going to talk about opportunities and risks of people, especially young people, resorting to AI for psychological support. Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you so much, Chief Justice. So this isn't set up as a debate. I'm not going to respond to Will's provocation. It's more of a smorgasbord of perspectives on science and law. And Will's talked about the public sphere. I'm talking really about the private sphere, I guess. And my topic is a challenge that arises for both science and the law, arising from the speed with which AI is developed and deployed in increasingly more facets of our private lives, not just our public lives. Because it is so apparently sophisticated and easily available, AI has been making a move into one of those most delicate of human relationships, which is the provision of support for well-being and good mental health. AI therapy has a historical precursor, in fact, and that's one of the earliest chatbots. Many of you will have heard of ELIZA. ELIZA chatbot was developed in 1966 by an MIT computer scientist, Joseph Weizenbaum, and he developed it to demonstrate the possibility of human-computer interactions, and he did it through a recognised psychological method, which is mimicking or sort of feeding back or mirroring the comments that were made by the human user. Surprisingly to Weizenbaum, in fact, people enjoyed talking to the chatbot, and it appeared to illustrate the potential for machine therapists for mental health, a potential that's now being revisited. Notably, however, Weizenbaum spent the large part of his career warning against such use, worrying that powers of judgment and credibility that simply did not exist would be attributed to the chatbot. People overestimate the insight of this talking machine. And Weizenbaum thought there were things that computers should not do in interacting with people, as you can see the analogies. Belief in chatbot therapists has, however, resurfaced. And the app market today is awash with more or less sophisticated tools promoted with the explicit purpose of improving well-being or reducing the symptoms of poor mental health, anxiety, sleeplessness, circular thoughts. And these burgeoned over the time of COVID, actually. So in 2021, the American Psychological Association calculated there were 10,000 to 20,000 mental health support apps available on app stores. And Deloitte in 2025 observed there's been over $10 million invested in innovative mental health and well-being technologies. So there's clearly a lot of interest in that. Now, those chatbots and apps I've spoken about are by and large developed by psychologists, and many of them are developed at universities, and they're more or less sophisticated in the support they appear to provide. Some are mere recommender models, very much like Netflix. You're feeling anxious, here's a meditation for you. Others use talking therapy, much more like ELIZA. They use cognitive behavioural therapy to encourage people to work on their anxieties or their sleeplessness or their symptoms of poor mental health. But the domain of mental health is being disrupted by another direction, by another kind of supposed support. And it appears, and it's been frequently reported, that people are using general purpose chatbots, Claude or ChatGPT, for mental health support. And sitting between them, the general generative AI and the specific psychological AIs, chatbots, are AI companions, which we've heard a lot about in the news recently. So AI companions are chatbots which are developed with the explicit purpose of providing companionship to people who perhaps are lonely, loneliness being one of the main drivers of poor mental health and indeed poor physical health. AI companions, if you haven't come across them, are an entity that is purchased and designed by the user to provide companionship. In 2025, there were 337 active for-profit companion apps worldwide, and they were predicted to generate $120 million of profit by the end of 2025. You can think about the conflict of interest that arises there between the for-profit purpose and the representation of companionship and friendliness. Now, the development of this range of mental health support tools, both design and by accident, is unsurprising. Mental health is on the rise in many countries, particularly amongst young people. In fact, we have a pandemic of poor mental health. And I'd refer you to the work of Origin or Patrick McGorry, who will talk for finding out about that pandemic. Unfortunately, there's a shortage of affordable mental health. Students, for example, can wait up to a year to see somebody who can help them with mental health while they're at university, which is often a place where they are experiencing extreme anxiety. So digital mental health is attractive in that space because a digital mental health tool is always available. It's personalised. It's never judgmental. It appears wise and empathetic, much like ELISA, appears being the important word. Clinically, they offer the attraction of personalised advice and assistance based on data collected from the individual. And general AI companions or chatbots are free, and it's been suggested that some of the attraction of the free tools or the companion tools are that they're pleasant. They don't ask anything of their user, as compared with the mental health chatbots designed by psychologists to replicate established behavioural therapies, which make demands on the users to work on their mental health as opposed to just being reassured by protestations of friendship and care. The difficulty is that there's very little, that this field is underlaid by risk. There's actually very little established evidence about whether any of these technologies work. So you can take established practices that work human to human in terms of mental health support or psychological support, but we don't know if they work when they're mediated through a chatbot. We simply don't know. Research, scientific research takes time, and these tools only really came onto the market in 2021. We know even less about the impact of AI companions, although it's been reported, and you couldn't have missed, that a number of youth suicides have implicated the involvement of either an AI companion, which encouraged the young person to join them in the face of suicidal ideation, or is implicated in the case of the generative AI tools that gave explicit instructions on how a young person might self-harm and even offered to write the suicide note to the parents. It's horrendous. In this environment, though, it's not clear what should be done. Until recently, these tools have not been subject to any sustained attention by the therapeutic goods regulators, the TGA in Australia or the FDA in the US, because they're treated as lifestyle products. Now, this apparent oversight might lie in the multifaceted character of mental health support tools. They're an AI, they're a consumer product, they're sold, they're available on an app store, they appear innocuous. Even the famous EU AI Act, which regulates the harms of AI in Europe, counts chatbots as low risk and not needing special attention. It's only now, with the infamous involvement of AI companion tools in youth suicide, that attention is starting to arise. The question remains, what do we do? Now, the law response seems to be to ban these products. Now, it's not clear that would be successful. As we know, generative AI can be prompted to do all sorts of things that it's not supposed to, and a young person with just a little bit of knowledge about computer science can create their own AI companion without having to purchase it from an app store. It's also possible that a categorical ban, which is a sort of go-to solution in times of worry about a tool, might actually impede the development of beneficial innovation by psychologists or people with domain expertise or lived experience. The likelihood is there is no easy answer, because the key features of this tool lie across several domains. But that should not be impossible to coordinate. It could be possible for scientists and lawyers and mental health professionals and educators to work together. My point would be that at least in Australia, scientists, I think, are very well trusted. And they have a capacity to be a voice of reason and expertise in the debate about which tools should be used and where they should be used and what we should do about them. and what the real harms are. So my suggestion is in this domain, science must lead law. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeannie. I must confess that the thought of a program offering young people the service of drafting a suicide note is pretty sobering. We're going to go next to our online panel member, Professor Toby Walsh. Toby's a world-leading researcher in artificial intelligence at my alma mater, UNSW, and CSIRO's Data 61. He is internationally recognised for his work on AI ethics, governance and the future impact of AI on society. I know from my discussions with Toby last week that he has a particular interest in AI creativity, or the question whether AI can be creative, and that reminded me of a program that I listened to on This American Life about Da Vinci Code 002, which is described as the darkly creative and troubling predecessor to ChatGPT. It was programmed by its creators to write poetry, and one of the poems that it wrote included this memorable line, "My words are poetry, your words are blah, blah, blah." And the poems are collected in a book called I Am Code, which is just fascinating and slightly terrifying. But Toby is going to speak about AI scientific creativity and the surrounding IP issues. Thank you, Toby.
Thank you very much, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very sorry I'm not there in person. Unfortunately, I already agreed to give a keynote talk at the Centre for Brains and Minds at the University of Sydney's annual symposium this afternoon, and that didn't give me time enough to get down to the Shine Dome this evening. So apologies that you've only got me virtually, but I can assure you, I can pinch myself. It's the real me. I've spent the last 40 years working in artificial intelligence, and I have to say it's the most exciting time to be working in the field. We're making substantive progress, and it's starting to find application in almost every aspect of our lives. And of course, one of the places which excites me perhaps more than most is the application it's having within science itself. And indeed, I think compared to some of the other areas where there's significant worry, for example, that it's going to take away people's jobs, in the area of science, it's definitely not taking away people's jobs. It's maybe hopefully accelerating the way that we can do science, given that there's almost an infinite amount of science, I suspect, for us to find the quicker, the better we can discover that, the quicker we can start tackling the problems afflicting the world. So it's an area where its application is unproblematic. Now, I imagine Stefan's going to tell you something more about the breadth of applications of artificial intelligence to the scientific method. I'm going to focus on one particular area, one particular philosophically, scientifically interesting area, which has significant legal consequence, which I thought was appropriate for this particular forum. And that's whether AI can be creative, can help us with the more creative aspects of doing science. I mean, certainly can help us with, as I said, pretty much all the different aspects. And I should say, it's very appropriate for us to be thinking about that. AI has definitely, in the application of AI to science has definitely had its Sputnik moment. It's definitely had a moment where it really caught people's attention. Just last year, of course, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry and the Nobel Prize in Physics went to a number of different AI researchers. Apologies to the chemists and the physicists in the room that we stole your prizes one year. You got them back there this year. So Demis Hassabis, for example, was one of the co-winners of the prize for chemistry for his work at Google DeepMind on building the AlphaFold AI program that predicts the 3D structure of proteins, the molecules that make life. And just to put that in context for people who don't know too much about predicting the shapes of proteins, with this program, we were very quickly able to actually predict accurately the shapes of all the proteins in life. all the possible proteins that occur, the molecules of life that occur in us and in other animals. That's a fantastic, shape defines form. We're all very aware, all painfully aware, for example, of the spike shape to the COVID protein. So the shape of the molecules is really critical to understand their function. And it used to be, before artificial intelligence, that it was a significant enterprise to predict, to come up with the shape of a protein. It used to, you could pretty much get a PhD for unraveling the shape of a protein, and suddenly to be able to have a tool to do that. That's only the beginnings of what we can do in this space, because of course we want to go from not just predicting the shape, but actually building molecules with particular shapes and particular function. So it's a very exciting, evolving space that's now opened up with the possibility of doing things that literally were beyond what humans could do. There's plentiful other applications, but as I said, I want to focus my attention on a deep philosophical question, indeed, that's haunted the field of artificial intelligence from, well, in some sense, before the very beginning, for the last couple of 100 years. I want to take you back to Ada Lovelace. She's the first computer programmer. She was working with Charles Babbage, who was building what would have been, if he'd succeeded, the first mechanical computer. He was using the technology of the day, so it's cogs and steam engines. But he was trying to build a computer, the analytical engine. And Ada Lovelace fell into his orbit and wrote what is generally considered to be the first computer program. But she had a profound insight as to the capability of that machine. Just to put the context of the historical context here, Charles Babbage was building his analytical engine because, sorry, my computer's about to run out of power. Hopefully not too quickly. He was building his analytical engine because he wanted to remove the errors in mathematical tables, in tide tables, in astronomical tables. And of course, they were assembled by hand, and there were plentiful errors in these tables. And if you could mechanize, if you could compute those tables, then those errors might be reduced or eliminated. Ada Lovelace, though, saw that with these computers, we could do far more than just calculate mathematical tables, that those numbers might represent letters in an alphabet, and then those letters might represent words, and words, sentences, books, ideas. They might represent musical notes. They might represent dots in a picture. They might represent measurements in a scientific experiment. They can represent anything that we could represent with digital data. And so she started to think about, well, how far could we push that? And she made an objection, and one that I quite commonly hear, which is computers do just what we tell them to do. They can't be creative like humans can be creative. And there's this famous quote here that the analytical engine has no pretensions to originate anything and only does what we know how to perform. That question has haunted artificial intelligence. We'd be trying to build artificial minds, but would those minds be limited in some fundamental way? Would they lack, for example, our amazing human creativity, which of course is at the core of the scientific process of being able to come up with new original ideas and new and original discoveries? And it's one that, I'm quite optimistic that will show that there's perhaps nothing too special about the human mind, and it's something that our artificial minds could themselves be able to make. And indeed, there's already significant evidence that we can start to do that. One area that excites me significantly, I think there's immense progress, indeed there's an immense amount of money flowing into the area, is in drug discovery. Where unfortunately we're not discovering drugs quickly enough. It takes multiple years to discover a new drug. It costs billions of dollars to bring a drug to market. That is proving to be very painful. As an example, the latest antibiotic. This is the latest antibiotic, Halicin, named, of course, in honor of the fictional AI computer HAL 9000 from the wonderful movie and book 2001, A Space Odyssey. It was discovered not by humans, it was discovered by artificial intelligence, by machine learning. We're running out of antibiotics. Let's not forget, we're still prescribing penicillin, the first antibiotic that we discovered by accident. Ian Fleming discovered it by accident. Unfortunately, of course, many bacteria are becoming rather resistant, getting superbugs that are becoming resistant to the antibiotics that we do have because we're overprescribing them. We need more antibiotics. So it's very lucky that AI is coming along to speed up our discovery, our ability to come up with new antibiotics. And that's true of many other areas of drug discovery. AI is starting to prove a very valuable tool to help scientists discover new molecules with therapeutic effect. Other areas, other interesting areas that AI is starting to be applied, weather forecasting. Indeed, by many respects, certainly for short-range forecasts, the best short-range forecasts now are not using our physics models anymore. They're using AI models. That, of course, that's going to raise some interesting questions. One of the strengths, one of the great things about science, especially about physics, is its the mathematical models at the heart of the sorts of theories that we build, that are able to predict beyond the data upon which we capture. With artificial intelligence, of course, we're building models that are intimately connected to the data that we're trained on. Fantastic models, but they may not have the predictive accuracy or predictability and generalizability that we might have with more physics-based models. It's going to be an interesting space to watch. And in terms of discovery, this is one of my favorite examples. This was the first AI in space. This is a new type of radio antenna that was discovered using artificial intelligence, using genetic algorithms. It flew on the Deep Space 5 mission that NASA flew some 10 or 15 years ago. And you look at this antenna, it's got all these different lengths and shapes in it because it needs to work on all these different frequencies at the same time. I mean, quite honestly, it looks like a bent paperclip. But it's not something you could imagine a human mind coming up with. But it turns out it has all the properties that you would imagine. And indeed, there's a patent that's been filed for its shape. It's a nice example, though, of how artificial intelligence is going to be used to come up with new materials, new structures, new metamaterials. It's going to transform material science and various other areas of discovery. Perhaps the purest area that you could apply AI to in terms of creativity, of course, to mathematics. And I'm pleased to share some work that I did just 20 years ago now in actually using AI to discover new mathematics. Here we used artificial intelligence to discover a new type of integer. There's a wonderful repository. It's called the Online Encyclopedia of Integer Sequences. I encourage you to take a look at it. It's a lot of fun if you're of mathematical bent. That, of course, there's all the sequences that you would know, the sequence of prime numbers. But there's there's actually a dozen or so interesting sequences that our artificial intelligence came up with that mathematicians now have written journal articles around, gone off and played with and explored the properties of. Some numbers, here's one of them. This is the refactorable numbers where the number of divisors itself is prime. They have interesting mathematical properties. Mathematicians have started to play with them. One day, I hope we might actually build a cryptographic scheme based upon them. And there's lots of other areas that we've looked at. Here's another example, again, drawing from my own work, where these are graceful graphs. Mathematicians, physicists are interested in graceful graphs. They're a labeling of the graph where all the pairwise differences between the labels of connected edges are different. They've got uses in radio astronomy and various other places where you're interested in interference and things like this. And mathematicians are interested in if they can catalog which graceful graphs exist and which ones don't. Well, here's one that an AI came up with for us. It's a graceful labeling of a double-wheeled graph, two interconnected wheels. the mathematicians had posed the question, can we gracefully label every double-wheeled graph? Well, actually, we were able to use artificial intelligence to prove that question in the affirmative. It is actually possible to gracefully label every double-wheeled graph. But as I said, there are interesting legal consequences, legal issues that we need to think about once we start using AI in the very creative process of the scientific process, and various issues around intellectual property. One of them is around copyright. If we're getting AI to make things, can we copyright the things that we make? It's worth thinking back to how copyright itself came into existence. It was a response to a technological development. It was a response to the development of printing. Soon after we developed printing, we realized that we might need to protect the intellectual property of people, because now previously you had scribes in monasteries who would copy out books. That was rather slow and painful. We didn't have to worry about people copying your work too much. Suddenly we had a very cheap way of disseminating people's ideas. We wanted to encourage people to put those ideas down on paper. We invented copyright to protect those people, to encourage the production of ideas, production of novels, the prediction.
Toby, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm told that people are getting nervous about your laptop battery. Would you?
I think
are
I've
you
got
able
another 5
to
minutes.
plug it in? You're
got
okay.
another 5 minutes. I'll get to the end of my talk, I'm sure.
All right,
Give
thank
more to me
you.
when there's 10 minutes.
And also, I think we've got about another 3 minutes if you can.
I'm on time to finish. This is a painting that was made by an artificial intelligence, and there's a case was brought with the US Copyright Agency to see if the AI could own the copyright. The copyright agent, this was not decided in favor for the AI. It raises interesting questions we're going to have to address. I mean, if an AI owned the copyright, who would get the benefits from that copyright? Who are we encouraging? Who are we incentivizing? Do we need to adapt the law to deal with this new issue? But I just want to end by one where I think where the issues are even more stark, which is in terms of patents. On the left here, we've got a picture of a fractal container. And AI came up with this idea for a fractal container. I actually got a language model to come up with the idea on the right, which is a fractal glove, which might have interesting haptic properties that, just like the fractal container, might have interesting thermal and packing properties because of the fractal nature of them. And indeed, because the language models are trained on the online patent databases, the language model was even actually able to write the patent application. So we could soon be in a world in which AI is coming up with ideas and even writing the patent for them. And a number of cases have been brought in a number of jurisdictions, asking the question, is it possible for an AI to have a patent? Patents are typically in most jurisdictions owned by people. This is obviously not a person, but equally we do want to. The patent system exists to protect, to encourage and incentivize people to discover new ideas and to share those discoveries so that we can all stand on the shoulders of each other. How is that system, legal and scientific, going to adapt to deal with the fact that we've got these amazing tools that can do some of the creative things that we used to assign to humans? These are interesting fundamental questions, both of a philosophical, a scientific, and a legal nature that we now have to address. These are very exciting times. It's wonderful to be working in these times. And I will end there.
That your laptop lasts long enough for you to take some questions, because we were hoping you would help us with the questions. Our last speaker is Dr Stefan Harrer. Stefan is Director of AI for Science at CSIRO's Data 61, leading research and innovation that applies artificial intelligence to accelerate scientific discovery. He's an expert in developing safe and trustworthy AI systems for use in areas such as health, neuroscience and biotechnology. I asked my ChatGPT whether Stefan would be a good speaker. It said, based on publicly available information, I would say yes, Dr Stefan Harrer appears to be a very good speaker, particularly for audiences interested in AI. So that's good. And he's going to speak to us, as I foreshadowed earlier, about the ways in which AI can be used to augment every stage of scientific research, including ideation, meaning the coming up with a hypothesis. And I loved last week speaking to Stefan and hearing his optimism about the uses of AI. I despair a little of the lawyerly approach of it's going to be the end of the world as we know it. No disrespect to Will, but I do think, I absolutely understand the concerns and very much focused on the threat to a constitutional democracy. I understand those concerns, but I do love the optimism of the scientists of let's grab this and use it to accelerate our development. So I'd love to hear from you now, Stefan.
Thanks a lot for the flattering introduction. It's true, I'm very optimistic actually about the use of AI in science. I'll tell you why over the next couple of minutes.
So you got backward and forward.
Now, there you go. Okay, so there's exciting things, in fact, happening at the intersection of science and AI. Just over the last couple months, we saw a few monster deals going down in and across the world, right? We had a company by the name of Lila Sciences raise a $300 million round a couple of weeks ago, valued at a $1 billion a unicorn. What do? They develop a full stack assistive technology based on AI agents that helps biologists and researchers in the health and life sciences do their scientific discovery everyday work. The same happened with one of our partners, Google, who deployed and showed what they called an AI co-scientist, again geared to assist scientists in the health and life sciences and biology to do scientific discovery work. And there is other examples around here too. I had the great opportunity to spend some time with NVIDIA at their annual developer conference earlier this year, where they released a whole set of AI assistants, again, for biology and the health and life sciences. What is the driving force behind all of this, aside from, as you might argue, a great market that stands behind this? There's more here that comes to play, right? And the idea is that we can use AI to turbocharge, not replace, not change, not throw overboard, but to turbocharge and augment the scientific method. That scientific method, I can't say this often enough, right? That doesn't change. It's the DNA, it's the blueprint of how we do science. And that doesn't just go for biology, that goes across the entire board of scientific domains. What is that? We have an idea, we come up with a hypothesis, then we design an experiment to test this hypothesis. We run this experiment, we look at the experimental results long and hard, and then we decide whether our initial hypothesis holds up or whether we need to change it, and then we repeat. That is the scientific method. That's how we have done science. That's how we do science. That's how we will do science. This is not changing. But every single step of what I just described as the scientific bread and butter work can be augmented by AI. And by augment, I mean there's two trajectories that this augmentation can lead to value add. Number one is, when you heard about this from the law side of things, is productivity. Right? We can do things faster. We can do things at scale that we haven't been able to do before. That's the one side. But what's admittedly even more exciting, and Toby referred to this a bit earlier, is the creativity side of things. We can come up with new ideas, put AI co-science alongside human scientists, And you will see more innovative ideas come out of this joint venture, right? There's empirical data for it. This isn't just me, drinking my own Kool-Aid or looking through the crystal ball. There's actually, for anyone who wants to, get more substance to this claim, I would be very happy to point you to one of the recent studies and papers that come out there. So that is what's behind the general idea of scientists, co-scientists, AI-driven co-scientists for human scientists. There's a reason that the health and life sciences and biology have been chosen as the first landing pad, right? Everything I'll say from here on will be pretty much geared towards biology, but you'll see the hallmarks, and I'll make these connections, that allow to make the conclusion that, to draw the conclusion that, these principles, the opportunities for AI, for biology are just as big for other scientific domains, and we are already seeing some of the onset of that. So why biology? Well, biology is extremely messy. So to really bring it home, we don't understand life. Even the simplest biological systems blow out of all proportions pretty quickly. There's all sorts of different types of data and connected data. They are very dynamic, they change all the time. This is the incarnation of an extremely messy system that we don't understand. Simulating one single human cell in its dynamic state is currently the frontier of our understanding. So of course we have developed clusters of understanding along the omics journey, right? DNA sequencing has made some strides. We now can sequence a whole human genome at very low costs and very quickly. That tells us a lot about the initial blueprint. But then as we have to extrapolate from DNA to cells to organs to humans in their natural environment, that's where we quickly reach our limits. And that particularly means the limits of what the scientific method in the hands of human scientists can do. The same is true for the tools that we scientists have at our disposal. In biology, I just mentioned DNA sequencing here, right? And there's no need to look into all of these individual tools that I've listed here. The point being that the toolbox of a health and life sciences researcher explodes, right? With advanced tools, methods, technologies that require whole PhDs to spend years of time to learn how to use, to apply. And no scientist has the time to learn how to use them all, let alone realize what's out there, right? So we have a smorgasbord of data that is big, unstructured, noisy, multimodal, and we have a just as complicated combination of tools that are available to biologists. Mastering this environment is where AI technology can come in. If you look at a distribution of researchers in the health and life sciences and ask the question, who is able to actually run these tools? Who knows that they are out there? Who knows how to run them, how to analyze and interpret their output? And you see something like this. You have a few scientists, biologists, who have spent enormous amounts of time in either developing those tools or integrating it into their labs, and they know all about them. But the bulk of researchers out there does not fall into that category. They don't have that knowledge. And so the breakdown is even more profound. If you look at the numbers, there's less than a fifth of scientists who fall into that savvy category, and more than 80% are not in that category. What we want to do and what AI co-scientists in biology achieve is that they empower the bulk of biologists to be savvy users of those tools, mastering and conquering that vortex of data and tools that is at their disposal. That's what AI can do. How does it do this, right? So we've heard a lot about chatbots. We're way beyond the age of chatbots already, right? So they haven't gone away. But some of you might remember in the early days of ChatGPT, a famous advertisement in Silicon Valley on the side of a big construction site. Poster said, hey, ChatGPT, can you finish this building? And of course, point point made, right? So a chatbot can't do that. It can talk all night and day on how one might want to finish this building and have all sorts of discussions about it, but that doesn't change the state of the construction site. What has happened is that a technology that is called AI agents has emerged. And these AI agents go beyond what chatbots can do. AI agents is AI that can actually break down a complex problem statement into individual steps, a strategy on how to attack and solve that problem. So there's some reasoning, some planning here. And then, and most importantly, it's AI that can run other tools, right? So Demis Hassabis, who was the godfather of this AlphaFold technology that Toby spoke about right before, has famously said, I don't need to invent AI that replaces AlphaFold. I just need to invent a smart AI that can call upon the help of AlphaFold if needed. That's exactly what's happening with AI agents. These systems just listen to what a scientist wants to do, needs help with. They break this down into a workflow and what needs to be done, and then they tap in a self-orchestrated way into all the tools and data that is at their disposal, populates that workflow and runs it for a scientist. That's substantially different to just talking to a tool. And that's where we are right now. We have gone from AI systems that you can talk to and get advice from to AI systems that can truly act, as in the purest sense of acting, like do things, they run tasks for you as an assistive system. And that's what we have seen over the last year. That's what's behind these massive investment deals and also behind these massive investments in research programs and innovation programs, one of which I have the great honor of leading here at CSIRO, that introduces the concept of AI co-scientists. These are not just talking heads, these are actually systems that run things for us at scale in the lab and outside of it. As I said, we as well have put a strong focus on biology. And just to give you a glimpse of what's possible here, right? We actually have applications, real-world use cases. We don't just build stuff, throw it over the fence and see if it sticks. That's not what we do. We have actually chosen specific use cases, like real-world problems that need solving so that there is a real value add for humanity, and engineered backwards what kind of capabilities scientists would need to have that they don't have right now, that we can give them through these AI co-scientists. And there is applications in manufacturing. There is applications in the environmental space where we look into new sustainable materials. We have heard drug discovery and development. That's a very exciting frontier. Also in the energy field. And of course in health and biosecurity. There is applications all over the place that we are tackling. So this is not just blue sky research. This is combining real-world problems with real-world applications and the impact that it would have if we could solve these problems. So I invite you to have a look if that interests you. I think we will talk about it a little more later. So we have launched in CSIRO one of those co-scientists platform that we have developed just very recently. We've already reached over a third of our researcher population of thousands. And we're actually using this, right? So, we have genomicists who are getting work done in days which previously took them months or years to do. And this is just starting right now. So very exciting work that we have going on here, which I firmly believe puts us smack center on the competitive landscape of global research organizations, institutions that harness and leverage the power of AI wisely. There's a paper that I've written recently, and there's another fireside chat that I also want to point to you with NVIDIA's VP of Health and Life Sciences, Kimberly Powell. With my boss, John Whittle, I have also authored an article that looks a little bit into the trust and ethical side of things of doing this. Obviously, that's a very, very strong component of building any sort of AI. I think we might be talking about this as well in our panel discussion. And especially in science, we are very aware that any system, any AI-driven co-scientist that you put out there regardless of how powerful it is technically, regardless what it can do, will be dead in the water if users don't trust it. And that trust needs to be gained, and there's an art to it, and it's a very important part. So if you're interested in thinking a little bit more about how that looks like, I invite you to look at that article and that TED Talk that I just recently did. Please do connect with us, with me. I think we're going to have a great discussion now, but also even afterwards. If you have any questions, if you have any ideas, if you would like to try some of this technology that we did, we'd love to hear from you, and it would be great if you would get in touch. For now, thanks a lot for your attention. I'm looking forward to a great discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stefan. That was fantastic. And I wonder if I haven't happened upon the answer to the question I posed at the beginning about why legal method is perhaps an area where embracing AI does carry more risks of the kind that have been addressed by our two legal panel members, which is Stefan spoke about embracing AI to accelerate scientific discovery. And in terms of legal principle, the High Court has said that legal principle should develop slowly. It should develop attritionally according to the cases that come before the court, and perhaps by reference to the individuals that engage with the courts instead of by reference to the world of knowledge that can be easily and quickly analysed by artificial means. But I'm interested to know whether, Will and Stefan, you can see some common ground in the use of AI. Will, you're concerned about developing cognitive fundamentals of the legal brain. Stefan, I think you're confident that the scientists can develop the cognitive fundamentals of a scientific brain whilst using AI to augment every stage of their research. And I'm wondering if they're different kinds of brains or different levels of essential fundamentals that you referred to, Will, or perhaps just a greater reluctance on the part of lawyers to embrace technology. It's an interesting question. Will, if you'd like to go first.
I would love to just clarify that I actually closed my speech with an exhortation to develop more AI. I mean, I'm not in any way reluctant, and in fact, I think Australian scientists, if anything, are not ambitious enough in the way that they view the development of AI systems domestically, as opposed to using, becoming essentially a customer of large offshore Australian companies. So I just want to. I'm not.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I mistook that. But what I'm interested in teasing out is that difference between, and I do understand your concern about developing the cognitive fundamentals of a legal brain, because you want to have barristers who can stand up and develop an argument and not just produce AI written submissions, because they're just not persuasive, and the whole point of advocates is to persuade.
So on that exact point, I think it depends. I would agree that for experts in the field, I mean, I use AI in my research, and when I talk to very senior legal practitioners who have played around with AI, they say, I know exactly where it's wrong, and I know exactly where I need to correct it and move it towards the type of answers that I would want it to give, and I can work iteratively with the program to develop that consensus with it. So I think it very much depends where you are in your skilled journey, if you like, as to whether or not the de-skilling of relying too much on whether it's chatbots or agentic systems impacts your craft and your cognitive aptitude. And I'd love to see research done on the inflection point, on exactly, when you begin to lose your sharpness and when your brain structure changes back through too much use on AI. There's a
whole cohort of lawyers dedicating their brains to science, to the research to work out when they took a wrong turn.
So there's
I'm sure you'll find lots of volunteers.
There's very embryonic research on that front, and it's not satisfactory. There needs to be a lot more done. But I mean, to that extent, I think there's I'd be interested to hear your point of view on that.
So a couple things. One mantra that I keep teaching is, if you use AI out of the box, just automate what you did before and you just run this, you're you're essentially augmenting the mediocre, right? Very often you get away with it. It's like, you know, so la la. It has a name, AI slop, right? So it's content that if you're sort of trying to navigate through and don't excel or don't really go for shoot for the skies, you can get away with it. That's what you usually end up with if you're just using it 100% without contributing any thoughts, anything from yourself. Now, if you combine AI with the sharpness of a scientific brain, the curiosity of a human researcher and the experience that this researcher has, and teach that scientist, and that's where the art is, how to use AI to that advantage, I believe you're strengthening a muscle enormously that will not in any way dumb you down or take the momentum out of your scientific research, but accelerate it. But it's that learning how to use and what to use AI for, what not to use it for, that makes the difference, right? Not everything's better with AI, right? Oftentimes in this hype, you hear like, yeah, well, you throw AI in the mix, sugarcoat it over your stuff, and then with a self-fulfilling prophecy, awesome things will ensue. That's totally not how it works. It's, as a matter of fact, the cardinal sin of trying to infuse AI into your workplace. You start differently, right? That's the way we work with scientists, and we work as scientists, that we ask ourselves first, what problem do you want to solve, right? There isn't even a thought of AI in this in the first place. It's really like, what are the pressing scientific problems that we're facing? Then what are we doing as scientists to tackle them? And then we drill down into, well, what can we do right now? Like what really slows us down, or what skill do we not have that would make a difference here? And then we assess, well, and that's where we come in as scientists who know AI and scientists who know our scientific domain, like what kind of AI tools, if any, might help us here? And at that point, and only at that point, do we start to infuse in AI in what we do. And if we do it at that point, we have done all the homework. We have thought about what we want to solve. We have actually done the due diligence on whether we really need it or whether we do it because of FOMO or others do it. And we have found a way, we have pinpointed down where in our workflow we will actually use it. And I believe if we do it that way, it will amplify what we do and doesn't take us out of the loop.
Do we have any questions from the audience? And oh, sorry, Jeannie. Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to make a comment about that characterisation of law moving slowly and science moving quickly. I think that's true for judge-made law. The common law is judge-made law. Judges respond to the matters that are brought before them. There's actually another body of law that's really relevant when we're talking about these sort of scientific discoveries, which is regulatory law. So the benefits of these large projects, the Omnix projects, the Geomics projects, the various work that's being done, for example, in the area I'm interested in, on huge databases indicating to try and understand how mental illness arises, what early onset of mental illness works with. All of that work, before it hits the market, if it's going to affect humans, which are going to be using AI less well, and perhaps using older versions, all of that has to go through a regulatory mechanism. And usually that regulatory mechanism is called the TGA, which is applying law in a really quick way and having to keep up. It's not reactive, it's got to be proactive.
Yeah, very
and my comment would be that in that framework, I think that the work of a regulatory lawyer is perhaps closer to the work of someone working in the field of science, because the whole process of regulatory law is thinking about the framework that's provided by the regulatory system and characterising the challenge that's brought before it to see whether that system, that the scientific discovery is one that's consistent with the purposes of the regulatory law. So there's the testing, that's that sort of hypothesis testing characterisation method. I think that is closer.
I wonder whether you might also go back a step and have the AI simplifying the regulatory system. In other words, having the drafters using AI to simplify and summarise and avoid duplication in certainly delegated legislation. That's a question.
That's an augmenting task as opposed to a replacing task, which is, I think, kind of what precisely what we've spoken about. But in order to be able to do that, there needs to be an understanding of the underlying problem that's being dealt with. For example, the safety of a scientific output or a commercial product.
All right, I would like to leave a bit of time for questions. Do we have any questions from the audience? And Wendy, we've also got some questions online. Yes, we've got some roving mics, if the mics could come down. Perhaps starting with the lady over here with the black top.
I've actually got a really loud voice on my phone.
I think it just, for people with hearing impairments, it's always best if the microphone's used, yeah.
Great. Thank you to all the panellists for a great discussion. My question, though, is for Will. I'm interested as to why you chose the lens of constitutionalism to make your argument about erosion of sovereignty. On one account, constitutions are merely a manifestation of sovereignty. So why is it a violation of sovereignty generally? Why constitutional sovereignty? And I wondered if that's because you are trying to mount an argument that in some way it would be unconstitutional. The second part to my question is on your characterisation of delegation. Is the objection because it's not human, or is it a cumulative effect of it being not human and, as you said, owned by foreign companies potentially, and then also not qualified, legally qualified? Because if it's all three, then you could make an argument that delegation to a research assistant who's not yet admitted to practice or who might be a foreign national would also meet that, but for the non-human element. And to that end, I wondered if you'd given any thought to drawing analogies with the law on use of autonomous weapons, which says, yes, you can use the tech, but there just has to be a human in the chain of command.
Thank you so much. Those are two really excellent questions. I chose the constitutional lens because it's true. It depends on where you come, if you're an international lawyer or a domestic lawyer, about how you think through the question of sovereignty. In the Westphalian tradition, sovereignty is still legally grounded, and it's still grounded at some level on the legitimacy of the internal nation state. And so I'm interested in both the domestic erosion of institutions through over-reliance and over-delegation to non-human chatbots, because that's, I mean, currently what we are. We'll move into the agentic model in a minute. On the second point, it's both. It's both non-human and offshore. Ultimately, I see institutions developing. I hate being a futurist, particularly at this point in time, given the hype train. I can see institutions developing incrementally over a 20 to 30-year time period to accept more inclusion of non-human decision-making legitimately in a constitutional system. A liberal constitutional system, and it's best if that's done domestically rather than reliance on processes and ultimately cognitive processes which are completely outside the control of the nation state in which they're applied. So there's a lot to your questions, but those are my answers.
And the analogy with did you answer the third part?
Autonomous weapons. Look, I think the human in the loop stuff when it comes to the constitutional argument I'm making doesn't apply. I think having a High Court judge asking Claude what Claude thinks about X and just sort of about X and X being a constitutional dispute, and then seeing the output and saying, oh, that's mostly correct, and tinkering around the edges and changing a few errant citations. Over time, there's no way around the cognitive erosion that, unless there's a new way that human brains work when they're exposed to AI tools, which may be the case, there's no way around that cognitive erosion over time in a legal system.
I might go to Wendy.
I was just going to say, the human in the loop trope is possibly a little bit simplistic anyway, because what does that mean when you have a complicated AI system?
And that was my words, not the questioner's words. The questioner's words were more sophisticated, absolutely. So you're busting me, not busting the questioner. Yeah, no, and I agree with that, sorry.
All right, I might go to Wendy because she's got the online questions, and then, sir, I'll come to you for a question. Yes.
Thank you, Chief Justice, and thank you, panel. This has been a very illuminating conversation, and some of the questions are reflecting that. I've got a couple of online questions here. One that says, it's for the whole panel. Outside of Australian-owned LLM and agents, what protections could we put in place which would benefit and amplify science and law?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So obviously, smart regulation is a big point here. Smart regulation being what's called precision regulation. That means you regulate the use of AI in a specific application, not as a bulk technology. And so where that could go, similar to what the EU AI Act has done, is like look at Australian-specific application scenarios where LLMs or other AI are being used to impact what's being decided or done there, and then develop regulation about how that looks like. And regulation means that the classical ethical principles would apply: alignment, transparency, explainability, the respect of privacy and data ownership. Obviously, it would be great to actually infuse data. It's not just about the LLMs or the AI that we build onshore here, but it's also about the data that we use to train this AI and how to run it, to create a sovereign environment in which the regulation is Australian use case specific and works with Australian data that we have collected here and that resembles the facts, the demography, and the values of the country.
Will, you pressed your buzzer as well?
Just quickly, it's a great question. I have a model framework for the use of these, particularly in the public sector, for the use of algorithmic decision making generally, and including AI. And I think it's really important to establish an algorithmic register, a publicly available algorithmic register, like a patent register, like a trademark register, where the basic technologies, the basic data sets are uploaded. I think it's going to be amazing for open science. It's like a free open source software community solution to this highly concentrated and ultimately very commercially predatory market. And I think that's something that could happen. I was talking to the government about it, and then there was various political changes over the last 10 or 12 months, and that's
Perhaps
off the agenda.
also a scare about algorithmic decision making.
Yes, quite.
So I think that...
Absolutely, yeah. So that's my solution in a can to that question.
And Jeannie?
The AI Act is a product safety regime effectively, so it sits before products, before harm occurs. It's supposed to stop harm occurring. And that's great, but it's probably not enough because the uses of AI are so multifaceted and also unexpected. Particularly with sort of LLMs, or I would actually say even agentic AI, we don't quite know what's going to happen to it or how it'll be deployed by commercial producers. So actually it's really interesting. There's a new trend towards the kind of regulatory regime we have in this space, and its focus is not only on the loops, the hurdles that have to be jumped over to bring a product to market, but on the performance of the product. It's called performance-based regulation. And you see it in relation to our Online Safety Acts, our Scam Prevention Framework, the Digital Services Act, which are looking at the performance of the model and asking whether it performs in a way that's socially acceptable or safe, and moreover asking the company that's putting that model on the market, the commercial product, I'm not talking about the scientists doing research, the commercial product, and asking that company to keep records of the performance of the technology, the harms that occur, and then provide an explanation of what they're doing to correct that. And I think you can see that deals with, that's a response to some of the gone rogue things that we're seeing happening with the commercial products, to which the developers have sort of thrown up their hands and say, who would have thought? So performance-based regulation actually says, what's it doing, not just what did you mean it to do.
I'm going to ask people to keep their questions and answers short because we're running out of time. But there was a gentleman with the blue shirt and then the lady with the chartreuse jacket.
Is there a requirement, do you think, to train undergraduate students in the use of AI, given your comments, Stefan?
Yes. Yes, there is. It's very important. We do it. We do that. Education and upskilling is just as important as developing the technology itself. Technological innovation, especially AI one, is more a behavioral, cultural change than a technological transformation.
But I don't know if you were also referring to legal undergraduates, but Will and Jeannie, would you agree that
Both,
would
yes.
also a yes?
No.
No?
No, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a computer scientist. My students use pens and paper. They don't need to know how the paper's produced. They don't need to know how the pens work, other than that they work. If the technology came to a particular point where it was so ubiquitous that would be necessary, it's more important to teach the core methods and techniques of our discipline and then assess them accordingly. The best maths departments in the world don't let students bring calculators into exams for exactly the same reason. And high quality faculties in arts and social sciences should take the same view to the use of AI in our degrees.
So I take a different view, actually.
Yeah, me too.
So I think take out assessment. So of course we don't want students to cheat. So leave assessment out of the conversation about AI literacy. Of course students shouldn't cheat. Of course they shouldn't use people to write their essays for them or AI. But we can deal with that really easily. We can get rid of the cheating bit. So then we can talk about the pedagogical bit. Now I teach a subject called AI ethics and the law. And I guess I'm lucky enough that that's taught by that's a cross-disciplinary subject taught by lawyers and computer scientists and philosophers. But I actually think if we're sending students to a world that is full of AI, the only way we teach students what the ethics of AI really means, what responsibility about AI means, what professional ethics means, is actually for them to have some understanding of what the technology can do. If I tell students don't use ChatGPT because, that's not a very good answer. Or if we talk to students about how generative models produce language or how machine learning models synthesise data, students have a much better understanding about what the capacities and the limits are. They don't need to be computer scientists to do that, but they need to be, my opinion is they need to be embedded in that, and that is part of their cognitive development.
And was there a second part to your question, just before we hand the microphone?
Oh, just a comment about, I hope AI is researching fusion power to actually allow the energy production that will require to use AI.
Thank you. It's been a magnificent panel. Last week I attended a conference in Sydney and I was horrified to go to the fair part, and there is a group developing a system to assist a surgeon. He is using real patient information, and when I asked them where was that information being stored, they said, oh, I don't know, I guess it is in the US. So here you have Australian patients being used as guinea pigs and their data being stored in the US, and people are not giving a second thought as to the privacy of those patients.
I think you should probably report that to the Information Commissioner, Privacy Commissioner. That's probably the best person to advise you on next steps.
But I don't think me as a common person.
I think you can. Yeah.
There was actually a decision recently by the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner on the use of data by Harrison AI that was sharing the data with a commercial entity, scan data with a commercial entity, and the Privacy Commissioner took that very seriously. In the end, the Privacy Commissioner thought that actually the data had been anonymised sufficiently that the data was appropriate to use. But I'm going to, Stefan might want to say something. I'm going to just, I take your point about where's the data and the like, but it's only by people in Australia sharing their data that we will benefit from the gains of precision science. So the things that Stefan talked about earlier, and they're happening at my university, I'm sure they're happening at this university, with huge data sets of healthy populations which can be tracked across time to understand the genesis of both mental illness and physical diseases is truly astronomically exciting. It should blow everybody's minds. It's that idea of precision medicine is a possibility. I'm now throwing the microphone to the scientist.
Yeah, no, firstly, I'll echo everything that my co-panelists have said here, but this is, of course, not a situation that's acceptable in any way, right? With any AI application, data governance is imperative, right? So you need to know your data flows, you need to be able to transparently explain where data goes, what data goes into your systems, where data goes that comes out of your system, and how it's used, right? So that's part of safe, ethical AI design. And the situation like you described it, the way you described it, it's clearly against all of this, right? So, and not, I would say, representative for how good biomedical device or software as a medical device design works in reality, right? We have very clear rules for that, and they are enforced, and designers of systems that deal with health data and electronic health records need to obey them, right? So that's for the records. Now, one point I want to make, though, is, and specifically around precision medicine, there is incredible value in terms of better care, better outcomes that evolves from the use of AI in analyzing patient data, and patients do realize that. I want to cite one of my personal heroes in this field, Eric Topol, has written a book, The Patient Will See You Now, and it's all about that change from a provider-centric monopoly in the health and life sciences to a democratized patient-centric model where the patients actually decide more and more what happens to their data. And you wouldn't believe how much patients are actually seeing and are willing to use their data for infusing the right kind of applications and properly applications if it returns improve. Yeah.
With the DHS.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what you mean about
Yeah.
population data.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. So I can only hope that, cases like the ones you ran into are not happening, because, the one thing I would also say is, especially healthcare, is not observing that Silicon Valley paradigm of move fast and break things. You move fast and break things, and you do this once and you're done, and you're taking half the field with you, right? So it's not the discipline to go, Wild West style here with this technology. So yeah.
Okay, I think we've run out of time. Thank you all for your questions, and thank you to our magnificent panel, Will, Jeannie, Toby and Stefan, for your presentations, but also your discussion of the issues afterwards and your responses to the questions. I think you'll all agree it's been an extremely interesting and valuable symposium, and I'd ask you please to thank the speakers in the usual way. I'm now going to hand over to the Honourable Alan Robertson, the President of the Australian Academy of Law, to offer a vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Lucy. The only point of information I want to impart is that about a month ago, the Australian Academy of Law had a lecture or seminar in Sydney with I'll call him a moral philosopher from Oxford, Professor John Tsoulis, and his provocative title, the title of his paper, was "What's Wrong with AI Judges?" So if you want to look on the Academy of Law's website, you'll see the paper or a closely related paper. And there was an interesting question from the eminent Michael Kirby, who asked, well, if you had AI judges, they would be conservative, wouldn't they? How would you get a judgment like Mabo out of the majority judgment in Mabo out of an AI judge? You just get the dissenting judgment of Justice Dawson, which was orthodox. And part of Professor Tsoulis' answer was, and I won't do it justice, but part of it was, well, in 2017, as long ago as 2017, AI won a game of Go against the Chinese grandmaster with a move that no human had thought of in the preceding hundreds of years. So that was something to think about. But I do wish to thank, first of all, the four speakers. I'm not sure whether Toby Walsh is still with us or whether the electricity supply cut him off. So I do thank the four speakers. I thank as well our chair, Chief Justice Lucy McCallum, who's made time to be here from her busy schedule. I want to thank the Australian Academy of Science for their organisation, organising the event, providing the magnificent premises. Especially I wish to thank Lisa Crocker, who's done a lot from the AAS side to organise the event, and I also wish to thank Kylie Cook, who's the Academy of Law Secretariat, for her work. And I also wish to thank the President of the Australian Academy of Science, President Jagadish, for his hospitality and his courtesy. As he pointed out in his opening remarks, this is the 8th symposium, joint symposium we have had, and it's been another very stimulating session. Lastly, I wish to thank the audience, both you here in the Shine Dome. I think there's probably about 70 or 75 of you here, and I gather there's about 250 or so online. So to those of you who are here, you're welcome to join us outside for some refreshments. So thank you all, and thank the speakers again.